even through all that, especially if you've been on the mainland for a while and you come back, it's the silence. You hear the birds, yes, and the sea, but then there's this silence, and that silence, I think, is traffic, basically, that you don't hear the cars or the trucks or ambulances. If you hear an ambulance or something like that, you know it's the television.
That was MacDara Ó Conaola, Gaeilgeoir, sean-nós singer, talking to us from his home on Inisheer, the smallest of the Aran Islands. And I'm Martin Nutty.
And I'm John Lee. Welcome to another serving of the Global Irish Nation Conversation here on Irish Stew.
This episode of Irish Stew is brought to you by Murph Guide, the New York City nightlife website, connecting the fun to the fun people. Visit murphguide.com.
Hey, welcome back to Irish Stew. Martin Nutty and I live on an island, population 1.6 million. Today we're going to travel to an island, off an island, behind an island, off the European mainland, population 240.
Yes, John, and great to be back on the podcast. Our guest today is MacDara Ó Conaola. He is an islander. He is a Gaeilgeoir.
A what?
A Gaeilgeoir, John.
Help me out here, Martin.
Dude, how many times? Like literally? Gaeilgeoir means he's a native Irish speaker.
I knew that. But maybe somebody in our vast listenership didn't know that.
True.
No.
He's also a singer in the sean-nós tradition.
A what?
Again, sean-nós. You know what sean-nós means, don't you?
It's that style of singing that's more in a kind of a narrative than a melodic form.
Yes, and for those that may be Gaelically challenged, sean-nós means old way. So John isn't, I'm glad to report, isn't quite as dumb as he's trying to play up on this intro, this rather extended intro.
It's not a stretch, Martin.
But when I think of our guest, MacDara, I think of him in terms of being a culture warrior. And so with that, welcome to the podcast, MacDara.
Oh, Garamila, thank you very much, Martin. I guess John, or Sean, which is the Irish for John. A lot of people don't know that. Yes.
I'll go with that.
Martin.
It's Misha Martin, os Baile Clia.
Sinead.
Which is, for our listeners that are not familiar with the Irish language, I'm Martin from Dublin, Baile Clia, in the Gaelic for Dublin, although technically speaking, you probably I should say Dublin, meaning Black Pool, which is the origin of that city name. Baile Clia translated means town of the hurdle ford, which apparently was a separate settlement upstream from the Dublin or the Black Pool that Dublin takes its name after. With that amount of etymology, why don't we just kick this off by telling me a little bit about what you would see or what you would hear if you opened your door today?
Well, today it's a windy day, which isn't too uncommon on the Aran Islands. We're exposed to the wild Atlantic after all. And even on the calmest day, it could be zero wind. You'll hear the sea, the kind of roar or rumble of the sea in the background, because it's 2 or 2.5 miles, maybe 2 miles square. So even if you stood in the center of the island, you're only, 1.5 kilometers or something from the sea. So you'll always hear the sea, especially at the back of the island. Surfers come out here because there's always big waves there. And crazy, because it's all rock there. If it was sand, like Hawaii or somewhere like that, you'd understand. Or over in County Clare there, which is just 10 kilometers across the sound. But at the back of the island here, it's just rocky shore. And so that's, you would hear, and any time of the year, you'll hear different birds. In winter, you'll hear different kind of birds that stay on the island, But then we'll hear the tourist birds that come in the summertime, late spring, early summer, the cuckoo, and just it's a cacophony of birds and stuff in the summertime. It's beautiful. It's really, but even through all that, especially if you've been on the mainland for a while and you come back, it's the silence. You hear the birds, yes, and the sea, But then there's this silence, and that silence, I think, is traffic, basically, that you don't hear the cars or the trucks or ambulances. If you hear an ambulance or something like that, you know it's the television, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not short of ambulance and police siren noises living in New York City on our island, which is obviously very different from Inisheer, which is, as I understand it, the smallest of the 3 Aran Islands.
The smallest, but according to a New York Times article there a few years ago, the most beautiful of the 3 Aran Islands. So, and many other people say it's the most beautiful of the Aran Islands as well. I love all 3, obviously.
But I understand, that from earlier conversations with you, MacDara, I understand that your family origins aren't actually Inisheer. Is that correct?
Well,
or is it mixed?
It's mixed. Yeah. My mother's from Dublin, so the north side of Dublin there, and in a place called Artane, which I used to visit for Christmases and everything like that. So when we would go up there, we'd hear a siren. You'd be just doing whatever, and you'd hear ambulance or the cops passing, and it'd be wow, it'd be like being in a movie, And so and then my father's actually was born and raised in Inisheer, which is the neighboring island. But my grandfather was from Inisheer, and he grew up here, and he was a man here. But then he had an uncle in Inisheer, because my grandfather's, it's getting very complicated very quickly here, but you can rewind it and listen again. So my grandfather's mother, my great grandmother, was from Inisheer, but her brother, himself and his wife didn't have children, so they left the land to my grandfather, who moved to Inisheer, and he had his family there. He married an Inisheer woman who spent 12 years in Boston, by the way, before coming back to the island. And they married and had my father and my uncles and my aunts. But yeah, so the same thing happened to my father. So he moved here with my uncle, and they took over the land here. So my father married the Dublin woman, my mother, and my uncle, and they shared the land here. So sadly, my uncle passed away there a few years ago, my uncle Mickling, but he left me the house here. So we're in his house on the island now. So I didn't quite go to Inisheer, but I went to another uncle who himself, he didn't have children, so he left me the house here. Scale fada, long story.
Sinead. But I think, understanding those roots can be really important. And I like origins, as John will tell you, with probably a roll of his eyes. And the origins of names and the origins of people's story kind of help paint us a picture of understanding the background of our guests and the whole, Irish nation thing.
Yeah. No, you're a man after my own heart. I'm very interested in all that kind of stuff as well, and a big fan of your Nutty Chronicles podcast. Actually, that's delves deep into that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you for that shout out. But I'm going to ask you a question about the actual name of the island. I understand there's some dispute over the name and its meaning. Does it mean like the points of the compass in Gaelic? If you could refresh my memory, I remember Ohui is north, Oyas is to the south, but the east and west, I believe the east and west is at play in the name of the island. And
yes. Well, there's west and east, and here is west and her is east, but then there's eastern and western as well. So Erher and Irher. So Inisheer is Eastern Island, but we don't pronounce the TH in the middle of, in our dialect, we don't pronounce the H sound. So it's just Inisheer. So I think it came from something like that, or just Inisheer, East Island, So I hope we haven't lost too many listeners now with all this.
Hey, we had a guest on recently, Val Cummins, who wrote this, I got to get my hands on it, this Coastal Atlas of Ireland. She was an editor of it. And she got me thinking about sort of the natural history, the geology, the plant life. And I was looking up it's fascinating climate in the Aran Islands that allows for Mediterranean plants, alpine plants, and other kind of ecosystem that you wouldn't find all in the same place anywhere else. Let's tell us a little bit about what makes the islands unique from a kind of natural history standpoint.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point there, John. The Aran Islands, we are islands off Ireland, which itself is a big island. But we were probably connected thousands of years ago. They did studies that X amount of erosion every year. And the islands were bigger, obviously, that time, thousands of years ago. The famous fort on top of the cliff in Inisheer, which is the biggest island, that was seemingly, they calculated that was actually on top of a hill. So people thought they built it on top of a cliff for protection and stuff like that. But it was actually a round fort, and now it's a half circle fort on top of a cliff. But we are culturally from Connacht or Galway side, with the dialect of Irish and everything like that. But geographically, we're actually part of the Burren in County Clare. So we have limestone, whereas in Connemara out in Galway, they have granite. And I think this influences the people as well. The Aran Islanders are famously a bit more laid back because the limestone is very soft. You wouldn't want to bang it on your head or something like that, but it's soft, rock speaking wise. And it's easier to break if it doesn't fit in the wall. You just chip a bit off and it goes in nicely. Whereas the granite, it's almost like building walls with basketballs, and but we would speak the same dialect of Irish as the people, more or less the same dialect as the people in Connemara. Whereas in Clare, there's no Irish sadly there anymore, but the dialect they did speak was more of the Munster dialect. So they would be the Cunsatatu, whereas we're Kinchi Wiltu for how are you, So you're right about the climate as well. We have our own microclimate here. Microclimate, yeah. And so because of the Gulf Stream, it surrounds us, just like it surrounds Ireland and keeps Ireland nice and temperate. It surrounds us and keeps us even more temperate. And we never get below zero or, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, 32. So the livestock, cows and stuff like that, we leave them out all year, even when it gets cold, because whereas on the mainland, they would have to bring them into a big, barn or something like that. But we leave them out here all year round. And that's where I think the flowers, we get flowers here that grow only in the Arctic or in the Adriatic, just like you were saying. So because of this climate, and we have flowers that grow right on the coastal edge, because they like the saltiness and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting. We get botanists and people, wildlife people, coming here in groups during the summer and in winter, but mostly in the summer.
Talking about agriculture on the Aran Islands, are you familiar with the film The Field?
Oh, yeah.
Harris,
yes,
shot over in Connemara, not too far from you. And the thing that always stayed with me is that image of the guys going down to the coast, pulling the seaweed in baskets, going over the hill, and basically making the field out of the seaweed in the sand.
I did that myself.
Yeah, I understand that's where the soil comes from in the Aran Islands.
Yeah. They figured thousands of years ago, before the Ice Age, that it was just covered in forest and everything like that. They saw there's really, in parts of the center of the island, there's real dark soil that could only be from thousands of years old. So they do figure that it was covered in trees. But now it's, barren, and there's, if you see a tree, it's like, wow, but they grow more like hedges, but and they're all lopsided from the prevailing southwest wind, and but the seaweed, yeah. So basically, all the fields, it was craggy land, which means just bare rock, and so people just covered it with sand. They filled in the gaps because in the limestone you get the crevices. So they filled them in with stones first and then put sand on it and then seaweed. So the seaweed was the fertilizer. and whatever other rubbish was around, organic material, they would throw into and it would and it became soil, and that's all the fields and all the famous fields you see. Most of them are man-made fields. Now they the last, let's say, decade, they don't make any more fields anymore, because it's a beauty thing to show the rugged landscape. Or I'm not too sure why, but basically you're not allowed to make any more land. You can landscape your own garden, all that kind of stuff, but the out in the wilds at the back of the island, it's left as it is now, just to maintain stone walls and all that kind of stuff.
I guess that what that reflects to some degree is basically a shift in the life of the islands, where it might have been, 100 years ago, it would have been a life focused, I would assume, on fishing and agriculture. Now, which you alluded to earlier, tourism is playing a bigger role. And so kind of curating the island in a way to appeal to tourists must be important. But let me ask you this question. Why would people go to Inisheer as opposed to Inishmore or Inishmaan?
That's an easy-ish answer, because a lot of people from the other islands either secretly or outspokenly prefer Inisheer. Because, okay, so Inishmore is the big island, and it's a long 8-mile island. It's about 2.5 miles wide. But for us small islanders, it's a huge island, And but it has the fantastic fort, like I said, and has other magnificent cliffs and beautiful places on the island. But everything is more spread out. So you really need to walk or cycle from place to place, or get a minibus or something like that. And Inishmore can be quite overcrowded in the summer, kind of like Manhattan at rush hour. But because it's such a beautiful place, and it is gorgeous. But then Inishmaan, which is the middle island, it's a gorgeous island again, but there's less people. There's only about 180 people there. And, when you hear 180 people, you think, oh my God, that's 2 houses almost, but no. But because it's a small place, and generally it's compact village, so 180 people, you'd be surprised how much activity you'd see and how you wouldn't feel that lonely. But the thing about Inishmaan is, because it's a bigger island than Inisheer, but less population, it feels a bit lonelier, and it's not as touristy for some reason. But it's beautiful. If you want to get away from it all, I recommend Inishmaan. So that's the middle island, and it's gorgeous there. It's not as touristy. There aren't as many, kind of B&Bs and things like that. But Inisheer, then, where I'm from and where I grew up, it's the smallest island, but it's nice, compact. Everything is on the same side of the island. The 3 pubs are within, 5-minute walk of each other, so you can do a mini pub crawl, and places to eat and all that kind of stuff. And the other kind of part of the island has places as well. And we have lovely sights. We have a shipwreck on the island. We have a lovely lake. We have the biggest lake on the Aran Islands, even though we're the smallest island. And we have a castle. We have a tower. And we've one of the nicest playgrounds for kids in the world, I think. It's natural sandy. It's part of the beach. And there's a big football pitch. So everything in Inisheer is just compact and easy to get around, But then just 10 minutes up the road, you're out at the back of the island. And you can see beautiful views of the cliffs of Moher, because we're the island closest to Clare. So it's quite beautiful.
So I'm sold now.
There you go.
Hopefully future trips will afford me the opportunity.
You'll be most welcome.
Thank you. But let me ask you a little bit about the nature of tourism. If my history serves me correctly, and I think of the literary revival, I think, the guys like John Millington Synge, I'm not sure which of the islands he went to. I think it was Inishmaan.
Inishmaan, you're right there, yeah.
Kind of probably put the islands on the map initially as a tourist destination, especially for those that wanted to learn the language. If you look at the composition of tourism now, is it people looking for more for just to get away from the hubbub of day-to-day life, the urban life or whatever car-based life that we live, or to what degree is it kind of driven more by language considerations or maybe broader culture? How would you look at the mix?
Yes. Well, I would like it to be about the Irish language. I'll get into that later. But I think it's just the fact that they're islands, first of all, A. B, that we're famous for the Irish language and culture and all that kind of stuff. And because the rugged landscape, I think that and word of mouth, a lot of people put Inisheer in particular, but the Aran Islands on their number one place. This is Irish people. You hear them say, "Oh, my favorite place, Aran Islands," and all that kind of stuff. There are other places as well, but a lot of people will say the Aran Islands, and it is to get away because a lot of people come for the day, but then you're just part of a day trip kind of crowd. But the real magic and the real beauty is when the last boat leaves about 5:30, and there's no way out of the island. It might sound but it's actually beautiful. And whoever stayed, they've stayed because they want to experience the evening and the afternoon and the evening and the night on the island, or 2 nights, whatever. And that's when you see the real people, because during the day, everybody, it's like I said, it literally is like Manhattan, just pony and traps passing by, minibuses, all this kind of stuff, people just selling stuff. It's all sell. And then, so for example, in the morning before the first boat comes from Doolin in County Clare at, let's say, 10:30, you could be talking to your neighbour like this, or one of the guys who do the pony and traps, and be talking relaxed like this about whatever. And then the boat comes and then not that they won't look at you or anything like that. It's just that this is the season is short. Let's rake in as much as we can.
Showtime, so to speak. Showtime.
There you go. And then as soon as the last boat leaves again, people go home for their dinner, for the tea, whatever. And then in the evening, it's chill time. And that's that's what I'm saying. That I always recommend people, please come and stay the night. Because there's 3 lovely pubs. They're very different from each other. They have different personalities. And there's music and all that kind of stuff. And it's very romantic. A lot of people have met here and fallen in love and all that kind of stuff. And so, I definitely recommend it. Inisheer. Also, Inisheer, and then I would recommend for peace and quiet and just lonely walks. And when I say lonely, I mean quiet walks. It's not creepy or anything like that. It's beautiful. And Inisheer, even though it's crazy during the day, as soon as the boat leaves, it has a similar atmosphere. It's very nice. After the boat leaves, that's when the real magic starts, and you get to know the locals. They'll have more time to talk to you and all that kind of stuff.
So I am sold on the overnight experience as well.
There you
so
go.
nice
Yeah. And I'm not selling this. I'm just telling it like it is, man. but
sure the Chamber of Commerce is very happy with your pitch so far.
Yes.
We'll give them a recommendation for you.
Thanks very much.
Man.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. I could go on all day. And a lot of people come now because I don't know if you've heard of Father Ted. It was this sitcom back in the mid-90s. It was about, so it's about 3 priests on an island, and their goings on. It's very quirky and it's very funny. And so it's based on the Aran Islands. So they just squashed all the 3 islands into one island, and it's called Craggy Island. So at the opening sequence of that show, they fly over Inisheer. You can just about see my house there. And So a lot of people come because of that, and they had festivals and everything, and and that's another thing that draws people.
I asked a little bit about language earlier, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a quote from Patrick Pearse. And Pearse, for those that maybe are not that familiar with Irish history, was one of the 1916 revolutionaries that was executed following the rising of that particular year. And the quote goes, Tír gan teanga, tír gan anam, which translates into a country without a language is a country without soul. And so my question to you when we think of Irish is Ireland losing its soul?
Yeah. You see, okay, if you talk to me on a different day or a different part of the day, I have different views on the Irish language and what it means and how what's the word? How angry I get, or how what do you say? Como se dice?
Optimistic?
No, the opposite of that. Not deluded.
Pessimistic. Yeah.
Pessimistic, yeah. Or how pessimistic I get about the language, or optimistic about the language. Just depending on, or you might hear something or not hear something that'll kind of go, what's the point? Or then another day you'll feel like fighting, But overall, it's kind of like the Irish language it's kind of like, it's a burden and a blessing at the same time. A burden because it is this thing, and you understand that it's unique and special and that not that many people speak it, but because of that it's always a fight to keep it alive or to have opinions on it, and everybody has different opinions on it, ranging from 1 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 one way or the other, and or different ways how to save it, or what is right Irish and what isn't right Irish. And I'm like that, and I wave up and down on the scale myself. That's what I was saying, that it is such a I have a passion for it. Yeah, it's kind of like when Harry met Sally, when she says, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. But she really means I love you. And so it's the same with the Irish language. It's like, the Irish language is like the pandas in China, or all those, the rainforests. It's you say, you might look at the ads they show on TV or a documentary and kind of go, what's the point? Just let them go already, But then you say, but no, you can't, because it's yours and you feel passionate about it. Irish language is, in America, they call it Gaelic. And outside of Ireland, in Ireland, we call Gaelic Irish. So if you're speaking Irish, you're speaking this old Celtic language that's thousands of years old. And if it wasn't for the British or people like that invading us and forcing us to speak English, we would be speaking Irish, which then Ireland would have been just another country in Europe, like Norway or Poland or France, that we would probably have good enough English, but our native language would be Irish. So it would have changed the whole world in a way, because Ireland, as we all know, is very influential for such a small country. And part of that is because of the British, that they forced us out of our own country. I wonder if they knew when they were doing that in generations later, that because they did that, Ireland would be powerful. What was it? Soft power. Soft power. That's where we get our soft power. Really, is from our the people that were forced out of the country initially, and so by doing that, the British actually gave us power for later generations. So thank you, the British Empire, for that. But I jest. The language. So to come back to the language, then, so there's the places, the Gaeltacht, which means places in Ireland where Irish has been spoken, unbroken chain. I try and explain this to my kids. I've Sean and Michelle, they're 5 and 8, and I speak Irish to them, and they speak Irish together, which is a joy to my heart. And my wife Anna's from Poland, so there's 3 languages in the house, and but they any excuse to bring English in, they will, in either. But and I used to do that when I was a kid. We'd be playing, myself and my friends, and we'd be playing. At the time, it was North and South with Patrick Swayze that was big on TV. So we'd be playing North and South. So we'd be playing the characters, we'd be playing in English, but then in between dialogue, let's say, we'd be giving instructions to each other in Irish. So that's when the real language is Irish. Or when you give out to somebody, when you're angry at somebody, what language the person really speaks at that time.
I have one experience with the Gaeltacht, if I'm saying it correctly.
Okay.
This was a long time ago. I was in Connemara, and I was out in Clifton, and with a friend, and we rented bicycles. We went way the hell up into the hills, and we found ourselves in like a pub, post office, grocery store, a little, the pub part was about as big as my kitchen table here. And we're sitting down, and we're like, my friend and I started looking at each other because everybody was speaking Irish. And it was the first time I had encountered it, kind of in its real state.
You must have cycled a long way, did you?
It was pretty, we went pretty far, but we were way up in the hills.
All right. Clifton is famously, it's not part of the Gaeltacht. It's in Connemara, which are our neighbours across the bay, but it's in North Connemara. And the famous thing, this is how I remember it, that Daniel O'Connell went out there, let's say 170 years ago, whenever he was around, and gave a big speech in English, but nobody understood him. And then 100 years later, De Valera went out there and gave a speech in Irish, and nobody understood him. So that's the anecdote, that Irish died out within that time in that part, and that's true about a lot of the country. But that can happen. And did you know it was Irish they were speaking?
Well, by process of elimination.
Because my friends and I, so this is where I was going. So there's the Gaeltacht, and then there's Irish that they learn in other parts of Ireland. And unless they're brought up by a parent from the Gaeltacht or something like that, then they generally have Gaeltacht Irish as well. But they teach Irish, but they generally teach it with the sounds of English. So CH has become K, or the main other one is the R sound. So in Irish, in real Irish, the R sound is kind of more like a T or a D. So the word for example, for last night in Irish is aréir, but most people in Ireland would say aréir because there's R's there. So I'm trying to think of a way to change that, so that at least Irish people outside the Gaeltacht can pronounce words better, closer to the real native sounds. And so that's something I'm working on now. When I'm more optimistic and feel the energy to do it. But so often my friends and I would be out in a pub somewhere on the mainland, Dublin, Galway, and people you'd get kind of three reactions. You'd get, why are you speaking that language? That's a dead language. And they'd be cursing at you, shut up or whatever, and never too bad, but it's kind of disrespectful and kind of, why are you doing that, And other people then would be nice and they'd say, and do you like Ireland? And we'd say, yeah, of course we like Ireland. What do you mean? And because they would think we're from some other country. And then the other people, the third, would be Irish speakers from outside the Gaeltacht or inside the Gaeltacht who would be happy to hear Irish and would start talking to us and, where are you from? All that kind of stuff. So so my wife and I, we started this project. It's called Gaelic Green Tongue. And green, we put the green in there. Everybody's welcome. Green, white, and orange, and everybody, red, blue, whatever, are welcome. It's not only, it represents the green, the Emerald Isle. So because there's Scottish Gaelic as well, which is quite close. And I'm sure if I spent a month or two there, I'd be able to get the hang of it. But when you read it, it's a bit easier. You can kind of, all right, okay. But so we started this project, Gaelic Green Tongue, where we started by thinking, it'd be nice to, it was the psychologically speaking, when in the playground, if a kid is playing with a toy, then all the other kids will want that toy as well. So we were thinking, why not do that with the Irish language as well, so that if Irish people in the Gaeltacht and outside the Gaeltacht hear people from outside of Ireland who have nothing to do with Irish speaking or singing in Irish, then they'll kind of put more value on the language. So we got kids from all over the world to sing a well-known song called Bain Chamairech. It's kind of like our version of Frere Jacques. Each country has their kind of folky kind of children's song. And so we put that together and made the news here back in St. Patrick's Day. and or close to St. Patrick's Day, and so that's an ongoing thing. So we're definitely starting phase 2 now, where we'd love to hear from people who would have ideas or anything like that, and would like to contact us about anywhere in the world if they would want to take part by singing a song in Irish or something like that. So if they go to GaelicGreenTongue.com, they'll see the website there. So Gaelic is Gaelic, and green tongue, like the thing in your mouth. Do you know Seamus plug? Yeah.
I think you're presaging the Seamus plug, but we're not done with you yet, MacDara.
Yeah. Oh no, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of roll back to a couple of references you made about the 2 speeches in Clifton by Daniel O'Connell. For listeners that are maybe a little shaky on Irish history, Daniel O'Connell is essentially, I like to think of him as the Martin Luther King of Ireland, who fought for Gaelic emancipation, and an enormously important figure. And Eamon de Valera being another member of the 1916 Rising, and that intervening period where the language seemed to collapse. And my take on it is this. The Irish language collapsed not because the British said, don't speak Irish. The Irish language in some collapsed because native speakers that only spoke Irish realized that was a liability when it was likely that they were going to immigrate to an English-speaking country, be that Canada, be that Britain, be that America, and that drove it more. And one of the fascinating pieces of research that I've seen done actually in New York is an analysis of the 1851 census, which follows on from the famine era, where quite a number of Irish-born people, the only language that they actually speak is Irish, because much of the immigration from that time and place was from the west of Ireland, where Irish was predominantly spoken, let's say in the 1840s. So, in a very long-winded way, what I'm saying is that I believe that a lot of damage done to the broad utilization of Irish was driven by the expectation of immigration. And I don't know if you see it in those terms, but I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Initially, I think they were forced. They were just living their lives in Irish. They didn't see the need for speaking English. And initially, I think, they were forced to speak. The British just wanted them to be, if they weren't going to beat them, then at least to be like them. And then definitely it was that, even it happened here on the island here, that about 80 years ago, the Irish language nearly died out because people were just heading off to America or to England, or not so much Australia, but so people would speak in English, even if it was bad quality English, if you know what I mean. It would be better to have that than no English. So, but then De Valera again, he started the grants, where basically almost like a bribe. Here, we'll pay you this if you speak Irish, because he was very much for the Irish language. So he paid people, and even as a child, I remember the grants to speak Irish. We didn't need it. We were speaking Irish anyway. And it's kind of 50-50, and it still is. People who do care about the Irish, and let's say 50 who are kind of, yeah, we'll speak it if it's there, but they don't care either way. So that they're the kind of people, if we can get half of them, then, 75 critical mass or whatever you want to call it, then that'll keep it going. But there is a lot of people who just kind of give up or just they don't care about it. But I do think we need a lot of help if we're going to keep it alive in the Gaeltacht. And that's we're the well of Irish. Once, if the last native speaker dies, then the language is kind of, it's there, but is it really the language if natively, and I'm speaking this, understand it's a privilege that I was born and raised here. I don't know how I would think if I was born and raised somewhere else, and that I would learn Irish, but no matter how much I would learn it, I couldn't get that native thing. I can't really see that point of view. I would like try and be empathic and everything like that. So I'm just speaking from somebody from the Gaeltacht who, just by being born here, I can speak Irish. So yeah, and I understand there's thousands of people in Ireland and around the world who love the Irish language and they don't want to see it die, and they're taking classes and all that kind of stuff.
I think we can shift tracks a little bit by, I think where people hear the Irish language globally more than in any other form is in music, is in song, is in listening to the Irish Stew opening theme.
There you go. It's beautiful.
By Rosa Nutty. And that's another avenue for you, music, singing, and another avenue for the Irish language. But let's shift the focus to your music and your style of singing.
Yeah, I'm in the modern era. I'm not from 100 years ago or even 70 years ago. I'm from these decades, let's say. So I grew up with a mixture of pop, and my mother, she was into, because of my uncles and all that kind of stuff, into the Beatles and the blues and all that kind of music. So I grew up on one side with kind of more the English world kind of music, and then here with the sean-nós, as Martin mentioned, music, which is basically our version of soul music, a cappella soul music, because when you're singing it, and you can be technically a bad singer, or you can sing with a nice melodic voice, but it's the feeling that you put in the song that's the sean-nós. So you don't hear. It's kind of like when you hear somebody singing gospel music or something like that, or the blues, and you really feel what they're saying. It's the same thing with sean-nós, and there's sean-nós all over the world, every corner of the world. It's that kind of raw singing that nobody taught them that. They just sing. If they want to sound or whatever they want to do, that's sean-nós. It just means the old way, the old style. So that's half of where I was raised, and the other half is the more modern thing. But when you're singing, just like with the Irish language, when you're in that lane, you're in the Irish language lane. So you're in the Irish language universe, which is parallel with the English speaking and French and every other language in the world. They're different micro universes. So when I'm singing a song in Irish, I'm in the Irish world. When I'm singing a song in English, I'm in the English world. And we're lucky here that we are bilingual, so we can sing with feeling in English or in Irish. And so the sean-nós, because the sean-nós songs, they can go on for verses. A song can be 15 minutes or something like that. So that's not very commercial, really. So or even people nowadays, we have shorter attention spans. So a nice 3-minute song, 4-minute song is good enough. And some people it's sacrilegious to put music to sean-nós, but just sean-nós can always be there. If you sing a song in sean-nós style, then that's sean-nós style. If I put a guitar to it or a bit of fiddle or whatever, then that's based on sean-nós, and still the root of it is sean-nós, but it's just a more, maybe more easier to listen to, or if that's how you want to express yourself artistically, then go for it, And I grew up, my teens was hip hop, New York rap in particular, Brooklyn and all that kind of stuff. So, because that was a million miles from my growing up on 250 people, not 240. But every one person makes a difference here. So and so growing up in such a small community, which was a million miles from the ghetto or anything like that, listening to rap was very. It brought me into another world, and the gritty streets of New York. But then poetically, they're geniuses. When I think of some of them, they're only 19 or 18. Some of them. And the way they paint pictures over beautiful beats and samples and all that kind of stuff, it was mesmerizing to me. So that my go-to music would be rap and hip hop and / the Beatles and / sean-nós. So they would be depending on my mood. they would be my kind of musics to go to. And then a bit of this and a bit of that, Cajun or blues or whatever.
MacDara, you anticipating this interview a couple of days ago, I woke up thinking about the Irish language for some reason. Ago. I wonder if there is, yes, there must be rap music in the Irish language. And I very, very quickly found it.
All right.
But, we've been talking about your music. Let's just take a moment here. Let's take a break and let's hear a little bit of your music.
Slán leis dún agus is nach mí go slá a chaisi jeirhís bitir gáiles na Iran níor hálaid a bhain taismí cés múin oidir bháin nach a téad an fataí leamach níor na líán Slán le na go captíní bhí sé seúra go bán Is one le hug she went left at the law. Oh, touch yet all America, go fashion false left on. Oh, kneeling cheers the down the load, nach welch yet scapion. Nach me mighty give to Jaden was Narcy. The brand new she's a goon, oh, master Jacoshi. Nach Aran Islands, trag mir shini sangyam. Par vi karni dast khwen baur da kelfa. Baby richting oceaan Ta keins genoeg Amerika Nu zeg het German Ach kreeg no mission toren Tja Nile hille gamle ra Ach gemeint ha so val geen na badje dan ha
So that was Undún Angus from MacDara's 2006 album, Love Token. And MacDara, I wonder if you can kind of give us some color on that. I really love this track. I love the sound of it. I love the syncopation of it. But I believe it's a song about a boat. It's not actually about Undún Angus, which is this very impressive fort in Inisheer.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's obviously the boat, the ferry was named after the fort, and people here to differentiate called it Undún Angus because it was written. The spelling would suggest that it was written in the English way as opposed to the Irish way. So the Undún Angus was how they pronounced the boat's name, and because as you know, we're islands, so we don't just drive to this place or that place. There are cars on the island, but you stop at the coast, and then. But so all our stuff, mail, everything comes from the mainland, and it still does come on a cargo boat. We have plenty of passenger boats, and we have a plane, a 10-seater Islander, and that comes on every day, and the passenger boat comes every day. Compared to when I was a kid, it was only 2 days a week. 2 days a week during the week and on a Sunday to go back after a weekend. But now it's every day. So this boat was the 30s and 40s and a bit of the 50s. This was the boat that brought everything to the islands. So my granduncle, the late Dara Forsta from Inisheer, when the boat left the service, he wrote an ode to this boat. And so I just put my own flavor. This was my kind of ode to hip hop, really, even though it's not 100% hip hop or anything like that. But it was I kind of did it over a kind of a flow like that, and just to get the maritime feeling in it. So it's just basically the poet, my granduncle in this case, saying, "Oh, we remember the bad days. We'd be looking down." And how happy we'd be to see the little dot on the horizon that we knew that the boat was going to come, even if the weather was bad, because it had all our stuff and mail, checks from America or whatever. And then, it talks about the beautiful summer days when it'd be full of tourists. And tourists have a big part of our lives on the island. The whole world comes here, and it opens up our minds, and it makes us curious about different countries. And when I was a kid, I grew up singing songs and everything for tourists and Americans. They were fantastic audiences because they would get the humor in between the songs. It'd tell the meaning of the song or the little bit about life on the island. And So that's that song. It's basically just an ode to the boat and how important the boat is to connect the island with the mainland. And yeah.
Talking about music and culture, I'm curious. In 1996, a new TV channel was launched in Ireland called tinged, now known as TG Cahir or TG4, Cahir being the Irish for four. I wonder about the impact of that launch, from your perspective as an islander, as a Gaeilgeoir. Has that helped? To my mind, TG4 does some of the most innovative programming, and I love the fact that they'll use subtitles for my shaky Irish, what little is left of it.
From what I've heard, you're very good, Martin. You keep it up.
As I would say, meaning it's almost all lost.
Neat.
But there's actually a very interesting show done recently by Monaghan Magan, who is one of the presenters on TG4, actually called DNA Culture, which is basically the lost DNA. And it's done, he's speaking in Irish, but it's done in subtitles, but it actually revealed some really interesting deep heritage stuff that is hidden in the Irish DNA. But my question is a bit more specific. Has TG4 reinforced the language, reinforced the culture? Because that's how I see it, but I'm, again, sitting in a small island off the coast of America, unlike the island we're sitting on.
There you go. I know it's definitely a great thing, because when I was a kid or even a teenager, the only Irish we heard on the radio, on the television was, maybe half an hour programming a week. And we'd be, wow, they did that especially for us. Or somebody might say a word, Bosco. I don't know if you remember Bosco.
Yep.
He'd say something like, Tashe go hintach, or Tashe go hufasach. And we'd be, wow. We'd take any tiny bit of Irish we could get. So
just to project in for listeners there, Tashe go hintach or Tashe ufasach means that's wonderful or that's awful. I think would be a correct English.
Yes. And so and he spoke Dublin Irish, or she. I would never know Pascal was a boy or girl, but But so we just took whatever Irish they gave us, really. And before that there was the radio in Irish, Radio na Gaeltachta, which catered for the three main Gaeltachts. And but radio is one thing, TV is another thing. So by the time TG Cad or Tina G came along, for my kind of generation, it was great that it was there, but I wish it came when I was a kid. But I don't know what difference it would have made. Now that I think about it, I'm trying to think actually, because it definitely makes Irish wider and more acceptable on the mainland, because when you go to the mainland, and the whole thing about Gaeltacht and outside the Gaeltacht is that we kind of live in a bubble. Now, some people can see outside the bubble, but we live in the bubble, and I think a lot of people in the Gaeltacht don't realise the richness that they have. And if people from outside the Gaeltacht, Irish people outside the Gaeltacht, would praise us, it will show us that, so this language does have value, and encourage people who are maybe on the fence about it, even native Irish speakers themselves, but that it will give them the courage or the encouragement to speak Irish to their kids and to pass it on, because that's the only way to do it, really, is to pass it on. Or parents that might have a generation ago chose to speak Irish to their kids, even though they had native Irish themselves, they get a second chance with the grandkids that they can pass on. So I always talk to my kids about the unbroken chain of thousands of years of Irish language, and we're part of that chain of unbroken Irish. So now you're part of that. It's a lot for a 5 and 8 year old to take in, but I want them to because we didn't need that when I was a kid on the island. Irish was very strong, and we didn't even think that it was in danger or anything. We saw other Gaeltachts, all right, that it was dwindling, or that there was a lot of English, that you'd go there and you'd say, why are they talking English? So that my generation was very strong, and up until about 10 years ago was very strong here in the islands. But now it's at a point where you kind of go, right, this happened suddenly, and you have to start explaining things and the value of things. So so please help outside the Gaeltacht to reinforce our belief in ourselves and retain this valuable, because then if it dies out, people will be paying hundreds of thousands of euros to bring it back to life again. But by listening to old recordings on TG Cad or Radio na Gaeltachta or whatever, and say, that's how they said that word. But if we just speak it now, we don't have to do that. Because another thing, I meet a lot of people who had parents who spoke Irish but chose not to, and now they're angry that their parents didn't speak Irish to them. So that's another thing to think of later years, when your kids come back to you and say, why didn't you speak Irish to me? I could have had another language just like that. So that's the value, and it's very valuable for the brain to have two languages. It helps with other European languages, other world languages. Like my Polish is very bad still. We're together 17 years, but I would my pronunciation I can get pretty good because of Irish. We share almost more with European languages than we do with English, and so that's the benefit of Irish.
Yeah, in my own family and my personal experience, my older brother Stefan is a Gaeilgeoir, lives in North County, Dublin, and he spoke to his children, his 4 daughters, actually in Irish. I believe his wife, Fiona, basically spoke to them in English. And I've always been amazed by their facility of languages. So within that family of 4 girls, they speak Italian, French, German, obviously Irish and English, and a smattering of other languages quite easily, which is mind-blowing to me. So I think you can actually make a very strong case that it is great to teach or to actively engage with the language based on 2 factors. One is the facility to learn other languages faster, because it does wire the brain a little bit differently. And we know with children, with their young minds, the brains are very pliant. but it also enables more complex pronunciation, I would say, because
Absolutely,
you're making different kind of sounds that don't really exist in the English language. But unfortunately, we're kind of getting to that time, and I could keep going on this conversation, so there's much to share. But we might have to do that in person at some point.
Absolutely.
Inisheer, when the boat goes away and we're left with the quiet sound, or maybe the roaring sound of the ocean, and just the sound of the wind. Maybe over a pint of decent beer and one of the 3 pubs on the island. But that will be another time. But for now, we're getting to the point in the show where we do what we call our Seamus plug. And of course, you'll be able to tell our listeners what the word Seamus actually means. It might not be immediately obvious to most people, but I certainly want to hear your Seamus plug.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm a big... Seamus is a friend of mine, and so my Seamus plug would be, well, I mentioned the Gaelic Green Tongue earlier. Please check that out. We're on Twitter as well. But just from a music point of view, that's the Love Token, the album you mentioned, that's 15 years this year. So to celebrate that, I'm releasing the instrumental version. So, because there's a lot of songs on there. Oh yeah, because to learn songs, especially in Irish or in any language, is a great way to learn songs, because you're learning songs and sentences and grammar, but through songs. And songs for adults, growing up, not just children's songs. They might have a lovely way of explaining something or describing something, and a lot of words and phrases from songs have come into the language. From songs. So I'll put up the lyrics up there so you can sing along to all the tracks. And then another thing, we were talking about sean-nós singing earlier. The queen of sean-nós singing, or one of the queens of sean-nós singing, from Connemara. So it was a cross-bay collaboration between myself and Sarah Grealish. We did a song there for we started off just as a project that we both admired each other's singing and all that kind of stuff. But then we were thinking, because it's such a special thing, we could do it for some charity. So we chose the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. So every cent, every penny of this song goes to the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. So they really need your help. And you get a nice song along with it. And there's instrumental versions of that as well. And the lyrics are on the website. If you go to peggyandpeter.org, the song is Pegging is Pather, which means Pegging is Peggy in English and Pather is Peter. So it's peggyandpeter.org. And all the information is there, and you can download the tracks, or you can just go to iTunes or Amazon and download them there. And so that's there, my shameless plugs, and just enjoy the songs and enjoy the music. And I have a song up there. It's called Bulla Bus, which means clap your hands. But that's the Irish, so that's the Irish version of Jingle Bells, and it's just a little ditty. So for all you guys out there, you can listen to that. That's if it's before Christmas.
We'll be sure to share the links to all of those recommendations in your Seamus plug, and just to actually pick up on your translation of Irish names. Seamus is actually the Gaelic for James.
Oh yeah, Seamus, yeah. Mm-hmm. In Scotland, they call him Hamish.
Hamish, yeah.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. It's funny. I never realized that. I think of Hamish as this quintessentially Scottish name, but I never actually made that connection. I'm embarrassed to admit.
Not at all. In Ireland, we would call somebody, if we would call Seamus, if we were addressing Seamus, we'd say a Hamish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like a Vorchin, yeah.
Sinead, it's much closer.
Yeah. I give Irish lessons and I do translations as well. So there you go.
Yeah. And I would love to dip into that more, and we'll be sure to share all your links from this Seamus plug. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of John, who had to unfortunately dip out a little early. So if you've noticed the absence of John in the latter half of this episode, you'll know why. And on behalf of our listeners to kind of bringing island life a bit more close to us, and understanding a little about your life musical, your life as a Gaeilgeoir, your life as an islander. It's been a fabulous discussion, and I know you'll certainly have stimulated people's interest in visiting Inisheer. So, Gurmila Mahagat.
No, Gurmila Magahin.
Or in English, 1,000 thanks upon you. So, Gurmila Mahagat, MacDara.
No, Gurmila Magahin, Martin agus John. And love the Irish stew. It's wonderful. It really connects me to the world and New York and all that kind of stuff. So being here on the island, especially during the last year, where not that many people came to visit compared to other years, it was wonderful to connect that way with the world. So keep it up.
Well, Martin, MacDara, he paints such a beautiful portrait of the Aran Islands, what each island has in common, what makes them unique. And, it's really no surprise that a musician and an Irish language advocate would sketch such a compelling sound portrait of his island home, the sea, the waves, the birds, and the silence.
Yes, I enjoyed all of that, but selfishly, I also enjoyed the opportunity actually to use some of my Irish or Gaelic, as we say over in America. It's been a long time since I deployed that, and speaking to MacDara was touching a time in the past for me, a long time ago. I went to the Aran Islands when I was 10 years old, and it was probably more rural than it is now, but it resonated with me in a special way as a child back then. And all those sounds that MacDara mentioned, and the sound of the actual language itself, which is one of the oldest spoken languages in Europe, came flooding back to me in the most pleasant of ways.
Yeah, I have to say that's not an experience I had, but I love to hear it myself. I'm somebody who hangs out at the American Museum of Natural History down the street from where I live, and it was great to get MacDara's take on the ecosystems of the Aran Islands. I found that really interesting, the diverse microclimates that converge on those islands and the amazing effort it took to actually essentially grow fields on the unforgiving island limestone from sand and seaweed they lugged up.
Yeah, real echoes of the famous movie, The Field, with Richard Harris in it. And what's also interesting is now the Aran Islands are moving forward. And one of the things that MacDara mentioned is now the world comes to his little island. Before, they used to be these very isolated places. So agriculture is no longer important. It's more about welcoming tourists to experience that silence, the language, the culture, and best of all, a dark evening in a pub in Inisheer. So, John, it's that time in the podcast where we get to say goodbye, but just before we do that,
it's almost like our Seamus plug here. We'd love to hear from more people in our community that's forming around Irish Stew. We'd love to hear what topics you like. Maybe you have some observations that you could add to the conversation on some of the episodes we've had. We'd love to hear from you. Martin, what is our email address?
It is irishstewpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm there.
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bowens on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.